Something that doesn't receive a lot of attention is process tailoring. That is tailoring the process to the specific organization, the project, and the circumstances concerned. There is quite a body of work that's gone on in situational method engineering, and there's quite a group of people who are very interested in this. But it doesn't seem to have been taken up by the software development industry as a whole. Tailoring is needed because the circumstances have changed. Circumstances differ all the time. Most organizations don't overtly tailor their processes. There are lots of different reasons for this. Sometimes it's just a fear of the unknown, sometimes it's because they don't see the point in it, and sometimes leave it to the experts to get on with it. However, I'd like to go through the different levels of tailoring, starting with the process reference model. A process reference model is a general abstraction of processes in a particular domain. So we have process reference model for software development, we have process reference model for systems development, for supply chain management. I don't have any others offhand, but if you just Google process reference model, you'll probably find a few. These are generalized abstractions of the general processes that are agreed upon within the industry. So there's one other I thought of, is the ITIL, this service management process reference model. They are useful for defining the overall breakdown of the work, the terminology and the interfaces. So they're very good for helping with industry, say industry exchange or industry collaboration. They guide everybody about what purpose is to be achieved. So as I say, you define the processes, and each process has a particular purpose. Each process has some expected inputs, outputs. There are implied skills and knowledge that are needed in the process. So there's a general definition of the process that is generally applicable across basically the whole world. Then we get down to organization-wide processes. So an organization is expected to take this process reference model and tailor it to its own circumstances. Now, its own circumstances are largely driven by the organization's strategy. What business is it in? What specific skills has it got? What is its unique selling proposition? What is it good at? So in software development, for example, you might have one organization that's extremely skilled at the front end, that is the exploring the problem, designing the solution, gathering the requirements, but they're not crash hot at testing, for example, or delivery. You get another organization that's specialist in testing. You get a different organization that's general across the whole thing, but is really slick at cutting the code. Now, each of these do need to situate or to modify the process reference model for its own strategic needs and fill them in. So generally, they start by mapping the interfaces between the process. In this organization, what form and formatters they will be produced and when will it be produced. What happens if it's not produced? I think it was Microsoft, somebody was asking Microsoft reasonably recently how it managed to develop software across all of its divisions. Initially, they simply declared everybody would use the same language and kept the same conventions, but that had to go as Microsoft grew bigger and bigger. And these days, they're simply managed by contract. That is, one division will say, we will produce something that will have this interface. That's a contractual obligation, what it will do. Now, some people are familiar with designing by contract, and it's the same principle applied. Now, at the organizational level of processes, the same principle applies. The processes are designed by contract. So what are the interfaces between the processes? Never mind what goes on in the process, but what are the interfaces between the processes? Organizations may also want to decide on specific techniques that they will use. For example, they may declare that we will use UML tools. We will use UML for our architecture and our designs, or we will use inspections rather than peer reviews. Whatever it's appropriate. They also could declare that we'll have this environment and we'll use these tools. These are organization-wide decisions that affect the processes. Well, then we get down to the project. So we've got the general organization decisions about how the processes will run. But a project has specific resources and specific constraints and specific goals. It has a budget, so that provides the resources. It has a schedule, so that provides constraints. It has some functionality to be implemented and some quality levels expected of them. So these are the goals that have to be achieved. Now, working within that, the processes may need to be changed a little bit to achieve those goals or to meet that schedule to fit within those constraints. So that is the level of tailoring of the process. And you can see that happens. Whenever a project manager makes up a work breakdown structure, they're deciding how the processes will be deployed, how much time will be allowed for each process in each phase of the project. And in some ways, they will decide the combination of processes and, if necessary, even the techniques within the process, such as, I keep harking on about inspections, whether we do them or not, and if so, which variety we do. So we've got the processes that have come from the process reference model, tailored down to the organizational level, and then tailored again to the level of the project. Now, we get to the actual situated process. On any given day, circumstances are likely to be different and people are likely to be doing something quite different. They will consider what's required and alter how they implement the process or how they carry out the process on the day. It could be that somebody is away sick or somebody's been made available. It could be that you have to make up a bit of time, or there's more time has become available. It could be you have a new compiler or a new tool and you can use that. There are all these different little decisions which people may not think are any big deal. But unless you deliberately think about them and think about, well, how is this going to affect the process and how will it affect the way we do the work, then you kind of muddle through the same as ever, and sometimes that can lead to mistakes. So do we do this now? Well, some organizations do and some don't. I've seen an awful lot of people who really have learned one way of doing something and they get very disturbed if anybody tries to persuade them to do it any other way. So there is that to it. I have seen organizations kind of adopt a particular way of working, a particular style of working. I do know that telecommunications engineers, for example, or software developers for telecommunications, tend to be very, very careful. Now, if you took them out of that context and put them into a different industry, they'd probably retain those very careful habits, so they would just continue on with them. It'd take quite a bit to persuade them to do otherwise. At the same time, or in the same way, if you took somebody who's been developing web-based software for tryouts, they probably wouldn't go too well in the highly critical telecommunications engineer domain. So to some degree, this level of tailoring is not done, but to another degree, it is done all the time. People within a process do shift their efforts a bit to adopt to the schedule. They do adjust the way they do work and who's going to do the work, depending if somebody's away or somebody is present. They do adjust how they do the work based on the available tools. So to some degree it is done, but in another, in large, it is not done deliberately, but it could be.